CBA are 1 up in this match. They have to win it, of course, to stay in the top 3 and stay in the competition. I am your host, Adrian Healingstad Archerlock, and joining me once again, we do have Jack and Sowers for this series. Now, it's not the first time that we've seen SKYLINE top down. Where do you think they might take us in this next game?
Well, earlier in the tournament, we saw this exact same situation. SKYLINE top was down 1 game versus CBA, and they took them to Eye of Ashara, a dungeon that not a lot of people had practice, and they took them to Explosive. Now, in the second map of the tournament, when they played against SKYLINE D and they lost their first match, they decided to go to Seat of Triumvirate, and they took Explosive there, so maybe we could see it again.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I'm hearing that we do have the choice in, so we'll be able to get that on your screens momentarily. And yes, there you are. They are going to Seat of the Trumpet, I believe, going in for this one. So we'll have to see how that plays out for them. And I'm also hearing that Explosive is the final choice. So this is actually the exact same that they picked when they played against SKYLINE D earlier in the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an affix combination that a lot of these teams are expected to practice. Seat of the Triumvirate with the Explosive as the third affix is going to be the map for the grand finals for the region. So this is something that you expect to see them practice. They almost took a game off of SKYLINE D earlier in the tournament, the only team to really get that close to doing so. They just had a minor slip up on the last boss. If they can clean up their performance here, they should be able to clinch out and tie the series up 1-1.
Yeah, and we've been saying that Seat of the Triumphant is one of the hardest dungeons out there, basically. Like, it's really, really challenging. They almost had the clean run, but just narrowly wiping to some void energy at the very, very end of that one. Do you think they can pull it off this time, Jack?
Well, I certainly think it's a confidence pick for them, right? As Sowers mentioned, this is going to be the map for the grand final. So when you're preparing, when you're getting ready for this, you want to say, you know, you're going to be looking to the future. You don't want to be looking at just the first 2 rounds, just saying, oh, I'm just going to pick the maps that I'm familiar with and I'm going to be comfortable with or something like that. You want to be preparing for the grand finals. You want to be preparing for this map that you need to be doing. And again, they picked that third affix, which would be exactly the same as it's going to be there.
Yep, and 4 to 5 Quaking are going to be the other 2 affixes, of course. Sowers, what do you think we're looking out for? What do the teams have to do to kind of manage these affixes?
Well, you know, of course, the difficulty here in Seat is there's a lot of very large trash pools, so there's going to be explosives absolutely everywhere. You're going to have to really make a judgment calls of how big do we want to pull. If you pull a big, lots of trash, then you can kill it really fast, but of course you risk blanketing the world in those explosive orbs, which, you know, 1 or 2 of those orbs go off, maybe even 3, and, you know, your whole team's dead. It's a ton of time lost. You know, it's very hard to come back from that.
Yeah, but both these teams, of course, they do have the Blood Death Knights, they do have the Holy Paladins, they are equipped for this one. What do you think is going to be the deciding factor in who's able to better manage this dungeon?
Well, as you're talking about, they're very responsible and explosive extinguishers there. They're very, very good at being able to have this control, and that's one of the biggest things that they've been pushed to really focus on throughout this dungeon. They're saying, hey, we know we need to be able to practice this. We're going to be the best at it. And like I said, the cleanliness of the poles, and also just making sure, like we said last time, they actually did wipe on the last boss, so making sure they're able to get the positioning together. We did see one of the teams, for example, put a lot of markers down. That way they're able to have little call-outs of saying, here's where the shadow crashes are going to go. Here's where we're able to soak up all the Armageddons. That's what I'm going to really be looking for there.
We are going to be looking for it, and the stakes could not be higher. This is an elimination match, an elimination series. CBA 1 up against SKYLINE top, who have locked in the map choice. It's one that they already narrowly lost to the #1 seed earlier, but it was a good run up to that final boss. You see her there. She was the devastating factor. Can they execute a little bit better on Seat of the Triumvirate?
One of the scariest instances that we have seen thus far throughout the tournament, and it really needs to be taken in a very aggressive fashion, as you're seeing CBA here mirroring SKYLINE top, everything being pulled into the dead center of the room, really focusing on eliminating these explosives just as rapidly as possible, and really just running out the clock as best they can so that they don't have that dark withering stacking up onto the tank and just absolutely annihilating him here.
Yeah, so of course SKYLINE top did not pull any of the slimes around the room. Once you clear that, I believe CBA has done the same. We'll see once this kill percent gets counted up. When you kill the trash in the middle of the room around the boss, that's when he becomes active, so you do need to be careful so that you don't reset him or pull him so that you are forced to reset him. So now they're just going to clean up these slimes so that they have some more real estate for killing the boss. SKYLINE top just a little bit behind. Maybe they might doing the same pull here and gathering all the slimes. Of course, these explosives still can be quite dangerous, and then we're going to move on into the first boss, and then we'll see if the single target of CBA or if the burst damage from SKYLINE top will claim of the faster kill on this boss.
That's right, and important to note that both tanks did proc their purgatory there while clearing out the trash bags. Thankfully, we're only having to deal with fortified Zaral rather than a tyrannical, so they shouldn't be in too much danger, but it's always going to be something to watch out for as we're going later and later into the instance. It's one thing where you're saying, oh, wow, we know how much damage this stuff can deal, but it's actually not necessarily a bad thing if you're losing your tank right away. That way you're able to kind of rely on it a little bit later as you're going into these different trash packs. But Zeral, tell me about it, Sours. What's the big things to watch out for?
So the big thing to watch out on Zeral is he's going to spawn a bunch of these slimes around the room that are going to fixate onto the boss and slowly close in on him, and they're going to be spawning some purple void zones underneath them. And we also want to make sure that tanks are stacking. There's going to be a targeted ability on the tank from the boss that's going to spawn a large purple void zone. And of course the theme here in Seed of Triumvirate is that when you stand in one of these purple void zones, you saw the boss increase in size there just briefly, but any void area in this dungeon will double the damage that these mobs are going to be doing to you, so you want to avoid standing in them as much as possible. We saw SKYLINE D trying to do an okay job yesterday of dropping these bubbles. CBA is doing a kind of a poor job, taking up a lot of space. You know, if you run out of room on this boss, it could be very bad.
It seems they just can't be asked to even, have some responsible void zone drops right here. And you're seeing, of course, one of their demon hunters, the demon hunter for CBA going down into the void area where they have to be killing a number of different mobs. I believe they have to kill 10, then they will be able to get an extra action button that will allow them to hit the boss, stun him, and cause him to take very, very heavy increased damage. They're getting all of their void adds together here, getting them all tightly positioned together, and it's really going to help them out quite a lot when they're able to get the demon hunter out. He's able to get a big stun on the boss, and everybody lusts and just unloads on him.
Oh yeah, so another big difference we're seeing here between the two teams is the Warlock from SKYLINE Top is doing a great job keeping those slimes down, but there's a massive pile of slimes slowly approaching Zeral from CBA. Fire Mage has almost got them down. Of course, if these slimes do touch Zeral, they will explode, and that could very well mean a wipe for the whole group. And these slimes are very dangerous, and you have to deal with them.
Yeah, but you're saying they're also just causing quite a mess, and they are going to be spawning extra void zones throughout this. They're really going to be running out of real estate, as you're seeing CBA pulling, of course, Zeral into the corner there. That way the Decimate is going to be able to spawn the purples out there. SKYLINE Top just doing the same thing as they're getting their second set of ads spawning. You're going to see SKYLINE Top, of course, having one of their DPSers, or their tank even, going down into that void zone again and having to deal with another set of ads here.
Yeah, so we're getting close to that execute range. Both bosses are on the exact same health from both of these teams. Slowly wandering around. Got to be careful of the slimes. Got to be careful of everything. Make sure that you also don't run the boss out of his arena. If you accidentally reset this guy because you dragged him too far, that could be awful. Really close. Once, there's 3 deaths out of CBA. This is absolutely horrible. On 18%, this is definitely not what you want to have happen. There's a huge amount of time has been invested into this boss, and wiping at this low health,
it's just disastrous. And you're seeing CBA being punished, really just being punished for not actually responsibly placing any of the decimates there, just really running out of room at quite a rapid rate. Has SKYLINE Top playing very cleanly, both on the floor and on the boss fight there, already moving on towards opening up the portal, getting the rest of the open world up and available to them. CBA just now getting the stun out onto the boss. They should be able to burn it without too much of an issue. They do need to be able to get these slimes just slow down or just burn the last 10% in the process.
Yeah, so that is, of course, the strength of the Warlock versus the Mage. We see the Mage is likely because they have a plan to, of course, go to Blackrock Hold afterwards, as we've seen mages do quite well there. But the Warlock is able to multi-dot all of those slimes up and kill them quite well, whereas the Fire Mage doesn't really have that ability. They did lose a lot of people on this boss, but they are able to kill it, so they don't have to re-pull it from 100%. So they do save some time, but having those players dead for that boss, we see almost an entire minute slower on that boss kill when they were neck and neck for the longest time.
That's right, and you're even seeing, they do have to wait for that RP period. They do have to wait as SKYLINE Top here is getting into it and taking out the first of these Rift Wardens. You do have to deal with 3 different Rift Wardens. They do have regularized spawns over the course of this open field. One will be directly in front of you. Then they will be going off to the small temple, the small shrine off to the right-hand side, as you're seeing on the screen right now in the top right-hand corner. They will be having to go over there. In between pulls for Rift Wardens, you will see these void portals there that you have to kill the Rift Wardens to close. They will spawn little voidlings that don't give any trash %, but are just very small, very annoying to deal with, and can consume time that they just don't have.
Yeah, additionally, the danger of those small adds in between these pools is they can spawn explosive orbs, and they will also kill you if you stand on them when they spawn on you. So they'll fall down from the sky, you have to run around and dodge them, and then they're going to start dropping bombs everywhere, and it can get very messy very fast. And we've seen just what happens when things get messy. One player's, maybe even 3 die, and then a huge setback. The run back from the first room into this area is quite long, and this whole area is absolutely massive. There's a lot of running around, You know, this guy's dying actually quite slow for Skyline top. CBA is just getting into killing it as well, and then they will have to head over to that next location and deal with the next one of these big mobs.
That's right, they're pulling just a little bit of the extra trash there. They are taking care of the Trickster. The Tricksters are stealth mobs that are about 5 or 6 of them around the entire instance. They can be extremely, extremely deadly, so it always helps to keep in mind, you know, the regular eyes, the general areas that the Tricksters will be patrolling around. A lot of times they will be sticking to the roads that you're seeing around here, so it's very important as a healer especially, watching out for your tank, watching for where he's positioned at, trying to stay close to him if possible, or if you're seeing that he's, you know, carving a new path that you haven't gone down yet, make sure you're following behind him, that way he will be able to aggro the Trickster before it jumps you and deals so much damage here.
You see the first set of these little mobs spawning as Skyline top moves over to pull their next Rift Warden. There are a lot of explosive orbs down. These mobs are coming in, a lot of slimes. Now you do have to be careful for these slimes as well as a lot of other mobs in this dungeon, as they will explode upon killing them, and they will martyrdom you, and they can very easily eliminate your melee players. Now of course these teams are running double melee, so that risk is very real. You can very easily see these guys take out a guy after you've killed all the trash.
Not only is there a huge field of martyrdom, of just extra garbage that's going to be on the ground, extra void zones that can be, you know, affecting you, can be destroying you, but you also have to keep in mind there are going to be suppression fields periodically throughout some of the trash mobs. There are going to be slows, there are going to be more hindrances out there that'll really just be giving you a lot of grief. So it's nice to be able to have the Paladin, for example, having access to the Blessing of Freedom that on a very short cooldown, making things a lot cleaner, which you would really want to see. You know, the cleanliness you really need to be seeing out of Team CBA as their tank does go down along with one of their DPSers.
Yeah, this is, you know, really unfortunate out of CBA. Of course, this is Skyline top's map pick, and they are looking quite strong in it, doing a much better job dealing with this trash. A full wipe out of CBA, and of course they do have this long run back now. This is what happens, you know, maybe explosives get a little bit out of control, maybe the mobs get a little bit out of control, you fall behind, healer falls behind, tank falls behind, and then people start falling down, and then you've got a long way to run back.
A long way to run back and full reset again. We've seen how long it does take to get these Rift Wardens down. Just huge amount of HP to deal with, and such a hindrance going on there. So they have to be resetting. They have to get all the mobs back together. They will have more Voidlings that are going to be spawning explosive orbs. They're having to deal with all of the extra nonsense that's going to be going on there. So it can be just such a pain to deal with it here. And Skyline top playing cleanly, no deaths so far, about 8.5 minutes into the instance. And this is really what you want to be seeing out of their counter pick. And this is also what you want to see for a team that wants to grow and is planning to go to the grand finals here.
Yeah, absolutely. So these guys did reverse sweep CBA earlier, and they have also done a Blackrock Hold, which is where we are likely to see CBA take them following this dungeon. You know, they did do quite well in their Blackrock Hold. However, they did not, of course, defeat Skyline D when they went there. They have had additional time to practice now. You know, and additionally, you know, Skyline Top has had a smaller break between this game than CBA has had, because Skyline Top has had the longer break, I'm sorry, because they were the first series of the day, whereas CBA was the second series of the day. So they, you know, there could be some fatigue in play here for CBA, but of course this is Skyline Top's map pick, and they are doing quite a good job here.
Excellent move here. What you're seeing with the Demon Hunter, who had actually gotten freedom and sky stepped really early here on the side of Skyline Top. He just run away right before everyone else, and that was kind of why it took a little bit longer for all the trash to be cleared out. He had actually run ahead, taken care, and grabbed the last Rift Warden that the team actually has to deal with, and that way they're actually able to get them into some of the more favorable trash spawns. The last Warden, of course, it does spawn in a whole heap of Void Zone mess. You don't want to be able to have that buff out, and there are a number of patrols that are around that area, so it's great to see, of course, the Demon Hunter just being able to, you know, work on his mobility, or have the benefit of the extra mobility there, being able to pull it ahead of the time, meet everybody in a central location. That way you're not having the team having a lot of time backtracking, and they're able to position themselves the way they're able to get a bunch of trash pulls done, taking it out right before they pull Saprish.
Of course, Demon Hunters are one of the fastest classes in the game. They do have the double jump, the glide, they've got a dash, they run faster based on how much more mastery you have. Running off ahead like that to go and pull the Rift Warden early to prevent all that additional trash spawn. Really smart from these guys. This looks well rehearsed. You know, CBA running as a team together towards this mob. They were going to have extra trash to deal with as a result of that, but since Skyline Top was able to stay in combat with this Rift Warden longer, they will actually have less of those zero kill percentage mobs that they have to deal with.
Yeah, but as they clear again the rest of the trash, they are pulling more here with the Rift Warden, Skyline Top, making sure that they're getting the area clear for Saprish. You do need a huge field to be able to deal with him easily, not worrying about pulling extra mobs here. And you're seeing again, as they're engaging with the Rift Warden here, and as I believe they're pulling a full patrol here, they have to be dealing with them while they're here, all in this void zone. Usually it's going to be a lot more favorable, and that you're seeing the tank just taking tons and tons of damage here. Usually it's going to be a lot more favorable to be able to pull him down this hill, get him back onto the road. That way they're not going to have any of the buffs. That way they're not going to have any of the huge damage going out. Again, having their Demon Hunter going down. Tank has already Purgatory popped. Getting more deaths here on the Rogue as well. It just becomes so lethal when you're just leaving them right there in the void.
Yeah, a surprising amount of players are not aware of this Void Zone mechanic. Hopefully CBA has done their homework for this dungeon. They did take a nice bath in this void, and they're taking a lot of damage as a result of it. Deaths all around. Hopefully they don't wipe it up. They're still bathing in void, so that mob is empowered, doing additional 100% melee damage on his swings. You see the DK is getting absolutely chunked on every single swing. They just are so close to not being in damage, but they're standing in the void. Well, Skyline top, they're doing a much nicer job. There's no more void around them. It's a little bit of trash to clear up, and then they'll be able to move into the second boss.
That's right, clean, very well practiced. And again, this speaks to the kind of the confidence that Skyline top has had. Even though they have lost their sister team, the #1 seed, they're still going to be in it. They're still working their way out, and their goal is to work their way out of the losers bracket to get to that grand finals. And this is what you want to see out of the teams. You want to see that polish. You want to be able to see, the practice and the very high knowledge of the instance. You don't even have the Rogue, for example, releasing at all. Like by this time, he easily could have gotten back to the group, much like the Demon Hunter did. So you're really kind of wondering if there's any kind of tilt setting in. And how would you feel in this situation as a player yourself, playing in the last MDI and the TESFA tournaments? How does it feel when you're trying to get into this little tilt situation, how to get yourself out of it and get back on track?
Once you're up a game and you get a map picked like this against you that you really just don't want to have to deal with, it can be very frustrating. You have to just focus your mind, take deep breaths, realize that, okay, maybe this isn't our dungeon. We're just going to do our best in here. We saw a similar story coming out of Team No Healer earlier in the tournament where, their game plan was, of course, maps 1 and 3. Maybe that's what CBA has planned. While Skyline top is going and pulling the boss, CBA is cleaning up some trash because they do have a lot of room to clean up before they are able to safely engage this encounter.
Skyline top here is engaging with Sappers. There's a multi-boss fight that you're having to be dealing with that all have shared health pools. You have Sappers, of course, who will be doing blade dances that'll be increasing his melee attacks. He will also be dropping mines, which are, of course, killing YD very, very rapidly. Thankfully, they have one more battle res to be able to dole out after the one they've just cast on him. You have Dark Fang, of course, which is the dog ad, which will be using his Ravaging Darkness, which can just deal very high amount of damage, and a frontal cone, and can put a dot on you if you're standing in a little bit too long. And as well, you will have Shade Wing, which will just jump out and cast a Dread Screech. That Screech, of course, will disorient you and just be such a pain to deal with. So it's very important to be able to keep everybody close together and have, for the cleave damage, and have the constant mobility. That way you're able to easily just get the cleave damage you need and be able to move out of the mines constantly.
Yeah, they're doing a good job just kind of skedaddling about, dodging all of these mines whenever they get laid out. They're just going to keep on moving. You need to be, of course, very careful for these mines, very careful for this dog, this Dark Fang, as he jumps around at you and cleaves in front of him. Making sure the Warlock is keeping up with the explosive orbs. Looks like maybe 1-1 off there. People are taking a ton of damage. Perhaps maybe they missed a kick. You need to be, very aware of all the things going on in this boss. There's a lot to pay attention to. Bombs going off. Cats are jumping around. There's death coming out on CBA. It appears, something may have gone on over there. Skyline top is doing a good job. These two deaths are really sad. Like you can't use the B-res here. Maybe they should be running back right now. This trash has still got quite a lot of health. When you're sitting on the ground, the DK is dropping super low for Skyline top. There's so much going on. Hopefully these guys over on CBA are doing all right. They could have easily run back by now. Hopefully everything is going good over there.
You've seen, Skyline top again getting the next death there on YD as, CBA is just really struggling to get the rest of this trash taken care of. And we're seeing, some explosives going off and maybe some of the tilt starting to set in there as they're trying to stay, as mobile as possible. And that's one of the things when you're seeing, again, when you're on this, heavy melee compositions that you really have so many void zones, so many things to worry about, really, that you need to be relying, for example, on your Paladin to be able to drop, the extra Blessings of Freedom whenever possible. Let the melee just be able to get out of the, the different mechanics going on. The big thing with the suppression field that they were really having a lot of trouble with is it starts dealing lots and lots of damage to you when you start moving, but if you don't move out, you're standing in any of the martyrdom, any of the extra void zones that the ads are dropping when they die, and it makes it so much more difficult to be able to survive in this instance.
Yeah, it's really important that you just gotta, the CBA just has to stay calm and stay focused. They still have one match ahead of them. They are a little bit behind, only only 9% remaining on this boss for Skyline Top, where CBA is just about to engage him right now. You know, there is still, of course, that chance. We did see Skyline Top wipe on halfway through the last boss. You know, any wipe on a boss here could set you back an incredible amount of time. So you just have to keep on playing safe. They do have this nice cushion of safety. Of course, if you play too safe and too slow, then you could risk getting run over by the faster squad.
You're seeing Skyline Top here taking care of Saprish here and moving on. There's a couple of different ways to move on to the next boss of Viceroy. You are seeing, of course, the middle path that is covered by a bunch of slimes. There also is going to be the far left and far right paths that are going to be available to you. Near the, for example, the temple on the far right side, there is a little void area, void path that you're able to kind of circle around behind, which can make it very easy. And there's, you know, you're not even having to worry about those little slimes. But they do choose to instead go right up the middle, right up the gut, pulling their slimes into a bunch of other slimes. It is really, you know, you do have to watch out for the void zones that they're already walking into, but it is nice to be able to have that extra positioning, that extra kind of cushion, because these mobs don't deal too much damage as long as you're able to get very constant dispels off onto the tank, and if you're able to annihilate them very, very rapidly.
Yeah, you see the arms warrior doing a ton of damage on that trash over there from Skyline Top, where CBA is about almost halfway through this boss, doing a good job. They haven't had any deaths here. There are explosives to be watching out for. You know, who's going to be killing these explosives orbs if they spawn out at range? Fire Mage isn't necessarily the best at it. It will be likely in the hands of, see, the Demon Hunter running out there to kill the orb there. Maybe perhaps the Paladin, maybe the Blood Decay is running out. You know, it's a very hectic fight. You know, Skyline Top is cleaning up the trash, getting ready to pull the third boss.
We've seen Skyline Top here taking care of the different static patrols there that are going out there, and you are going to have to worry about the Greater Sorcerer that you will be spawning the Dark Matters. Just be so deadly. It is basically the most scary form of explosive that you have to be worrying about there. So they are taking very good advantage of the banish here on any of the bound ads that are going to be spawning whenever you have to deal with any of the summoners. Those ads will just disappear eventually, so you don't really have to focus on them. You don't really have to actually invest a lot of time into them. So you're seeing, again, they took care of that bound void, and right as they killed the Conjurer, they didn't even have to worry about it. So here they're taking care of the patrol, the Grand Shadow Weaver coming out. He will spawn that Dark Matter that can be such a pain to deal with, and just requires, you know, continued focus by everybody in the group, or you're able to take advantage of the line of sight like they're doing right here. So it's very interesting to see. There's huge damage. You're seeing it's almost killing the Paladin there because he wasn't quite out, but it really doesn't have that much damage, so I think they really could just burn it really quickly, and just, as they've been doing such a good job overall focusing on their explosives, this is exactly what they've been preparing for.
You know, it's a very interesting choice by Skyline there to line of sight that Dark Matter like they're doing again, as opposed to just simply killing it. You know, you can, of course, kill these Dark Matters so that they don't damage you. CBA is cleaning up over Saprish now, 9% health remaining. Everyone's looking a little bit injured, a little bit healthy, doing a pretty good job. They're cleaning up the trash here for Skyline. Just one more trash pool remains before they're able to engage the boss. And, you know, it's, you know, looking pretty good for them right now.
Yep, and you're seeing as Skyline Top taking care of the last Shadow Weaver there, that you did see they had the trap. They did have the banish there on the two ads, or they just had the banish out that would stop the rest of the patrol. So the Grand Shadow Weaver, of course, is not stopping for any CCs, but of course all of his other buddies, the other Conjurers, the Void Benders will. So you have to watch out for the Void Benders there. We're getting the Entropics out. We'll just basically vacuum in players together, and it will deal so much damage. So it's very important to be able to just focus heal YD here as he has that Entropic, making sure that you're able to take care of him. There is that burst explosion, but usually that's not as big of a deal. Usually it's going to be the single target damage that does go out on him. So it's very important to kind of make a decision ahead of time if you're a ranged DPS, if you want to be able to stand closer to the group and make sure that you're able to have kind of everybody in together, or as you're seeing right here with the Warlock, everybody starts moving and shifting away from him. He gets away from everybody else. That way he's not going to vacuum them in, and he begins just draining life to make sure the damage from the dot is not ticking too hard.
Yeah, we see, looks like CBA has actually shrouded into this room a little bit. They've got some slimes, they've got some explosive orbs spawning. Maybe they're going to do a bit of a bigger pool. No, it looks like they're taking it nice and calm over in the corner. Skyline Top is pulling the last trash over here, and we do see a couple of these tentacles squirming about, and now they will have to deal with these as well during the boss. These tentacles can be very dangerous, but they do, of course, have the Warlock to help deal with them, whereas CBA just has the Fire Mage for killing those ranged tentacles, so it could be very dangerous for them when they finally go on and engage him.
An important thing to know about the static trash packs there that you're seeing, they will have a little bit of void flares. There's usually are going to be the most dangerous mobs to really worry about because they do focus on a target. They just start drilling into them and dealing so much damage here. SKYLINE top, again, well positioned to take on Viceroy here. It can be very important just as you're engaging with this boss. You will be periodically getting 2 different sets of ads. You will be getting, of course, 3 tentacles coming out periodically, and you will also get some Void Bender ads that will be shielding the boss here. Really important to be able to get good movement on Viceroy, getting them in a favorable position there that they're going to be able to cleave onto them, get easy stuns, get easy cleave damage onto these tentacles.
Looks like Night Elf on CBA is dropping very low. They're almost done with this trash, just a little bit more to go. Viceroy has been engaged. They got some pretty good tentacle spawns over here. There is a death coming out on SKYLINE top on this boss. They do have a B-res charge to help bring him up if they need to, which they probably should, and there he is, back to join the fight. This is why you do have to be careful of these tentacles. If you get double or even triple picked by a tentacle, you could die quite fast. It's important to kick them. It's important to kill them. You do have to respect these trash mobs. A nice tentacle spawn here, 3 in a row. The 2 mobs are about to spawn for them, and they're going to shield the boss, of course. And then once these mobs are killed, of course, they can be gripped together. That way they can be cleaved down. You see the warrior has been holding his cooldowns until this very moment, doing a ton of burst, and now they're able to kick the boss before he finishes this Twilight cast, which will kill the entire group.
Yeah, but you've seen excellent use of the CDs and also excellent positioning on behalf of the tank there, moving him right into the midst of those 3 tentacle spawns and making it so much more easier to deal with the Void Bender ads, right as CBA, again, is just wiping to these mobs, just so deadly. You're seeing the difference there. SKYLINE top chose to trap those mobs, deal with the Shadow Weaver alone, whereas CBA rushed in, took on all of it at once, and they were burned for it.
They got overwhelmed by the explosive orbs, which you do always have to be careful of. When you fall behind on those orbs, you have to have every global a masterpiece, kill all those orbs as soon as possible. One orb goes off, all of a sudden you fall behind, you've got to heal, and then maybe another orb goes off, and then before you know it, all 5 members are dead, and of course you do have this long run back to engage the boss. You want to make sure that you don't pull any of the trash as you're heading back to the boss, because that could set you back. Maybe it looks like these guys are a little bit lost. They did shroud past some of the trash earlier. They might think they have to pull it now. They should have been able to skip some of it. Hopefully they don't use an invis potion. Of course, if you do use an invis potion, it will put your DPS potions on a 10-minute cooldown, so that could set them significantly behind. They're just eating up food and gathering themselves. This boss is 40% for SKYLINE top and looking pretty good so far.
We've seen as SKYLINE top is getting into 38%. They've had some tremendous tentacle spawns here, making sure that they're able to get extremely good cleave. And one of the biggest things, as a healer, nice as a Holy Paladin, for example, being able to have Hammer of Judgment there, where you're able to stun one of the far away tentacles every single time, every other time, making it a lot easier just to focus on the group. A lot of times you will find, for example, the primary healing that you really want to be jumping out there is going to be on any of the party members that are going to be targeted by 2 tentacles at a time, and with adding in Quaking into the mix, it can be extremely deadly to deal with the entropic force, that pushback that increases in strength. So I love the positioning as you're getting that bird's eye view here for SKYLINE top. They are always just working on not only, again, bringing in all the tentacles and the Void Benders in together so they're getting extra cleave damage, but also when this will end, they're going to leave them there. That way the entropic will give them a very high amount of room to work with. That way they're going to be standing at one edge of the room, being pushed into the other, and as this pool the pool contracts, as this boss fight goes on, they're going to run out of space. So it's very important to be able to get as much room as possible and not taking too much extra damage, especially when we're having those Quakings going off.
You see, unfortunately, CBA, so this is a risk you do have to take when you try to skip trash, where if you wipe after skipping stuff with Shroud, you will have to clear those trash packs that you did skip, and that can set you back even further on time, more so than just the time lost by those deaths. And, the mage, unfortunately, fell during that trash, and right as the trash died, a Quaking was going off, so they weren't able to start a res on him until well after the trash was dead. They still have a lot of trash to clear before they're able to engage Saprush, and SKYLINE top has started the RP to the final boss, and this is, their redemption story against this boss. Will they die again at 50%, or will they be able to finish this dungeon out really cleanly?
And that's one of the nice things when you're saying you're not only are we having a rematch here, but it's also another time to be able to have that redemption, have that also extra preparation. For they want to be able to get this win, they want to be able to move on to the grand finals, and the grand finals first first game is going to be this exact same map, but on a 24. So it's very, very important for them just to prove themselves, get as clean as possible here. As you're seeing, only 3 deaths to CBA's 21 here, and just the focus here. And this hasn't been one of the fastest runs. I think they could have been a lot quicker, for example, on the Shadow Weaver. I think they could have been a lot safer, for example, just killing the Dark Matter right away. The health pool of it is not too bad. And again, they've done a very good job of just clearing up explosive orbs just in general already. So I really like that they were taking advantage of, I really wish that they would have taken advantage of killing the Dark Matters, because they had to just line of sight 3 times, losing a lot of single target damage there.
Yeah, it's a very interesting play to do in that line of sight. Now, they are killing these 2 Rift Wardens here. These are the guys that, not these ones specifically that killed them earlier, but their friends that spawned during the boss fight. Now, they do have a lot of burst damage coming from this team, and there are 2 very important burst windows during Lura. We saw the damage from SKYLINE D was absolutely ridiculous when they did Lura, where SKYLINE D's damage on Lura had the boss around like 30 to 40% after the second damage increase phase, where SKYLINE top was only around 60% after that second phase. So maybe they know which cooldowns to save now to better maximize their damage that they can do in those different phases.
One of the nice things about this tournament is, of course, being able to have that look at both teams going up against each other. So you have to wonder, if they took the time last night as they were just getting ready to take a break and get ready for tomorrow, if they were going to be looking at it and saying, what could we be doing better? How could we be dishing out more damage during these backlash periods? Because its final boss, Lura, does have multiple phases. She will, of course, spawn 1 Rift Warden to start with. Once that Rift Warden dies, you will be, of course, having to deal with small Voidlings periodically throughout the fight. And once that Rift Warden dies, it will activate a backlash where they'll take very, very heavy increased damage. After that backlash ends, you will have 2 Rift Wardens that will spawn and you have to deal with. So it's very important to be able to get very strong focus on the Rift Wardens, but also during that backlash period, being able to maximize your damage, maximize your burst. And SKYLINE top, like you said, got burned on it, so they really want to see where they can improve there.
Yeah, so it's important to kill these greater Rift Wardens as fast as possible. You do see this volcanic pillar going out, and now a really nice thing that's been done here in the Legion expansion is these indicators on these void zones, where when you see a volcano and then if you stand in a pillar and the volcano disappears, that means you should in fact stand in that void zone. Where if you see a void zone and you run into it and then no volcano disappears, then you probably need to get out of there, right? So when you see these pillars up, that means something bad could happen, and as soon as that pillar goes away, of course that means you do want to stand there. But of course these do not actually split damage, so you only want to send 1 person to stand in them and not 2, otherwise you will be taking unnecessary damage that the healer will need to handle.
And you're seeing YD there jumping into it right away, and then there was a communication between the Paladin as he popped Divine Protection, stood in there in his place. So it was nice that they made sure that they were both standing in there at the same time before they actually had one of them leave. And they're engaging there right after the first backlash, pulling the next 2 Greater Rift Wardens right as CBA is wiping to Viceroy at 45% there, getting just halfway through the fight, and they're having to start all over again. I mean, we've seen Chinese teams soloing bosses for with just a blood DK, but I don't think they're going to be able to do it now.
Yeah, it looks like there's quite a few tentacles, giving this guy a little bit of a tickle. There's not a lot you can do in that situation. They might be falling behind. They don't have that incredible dot spread that the Warlock provides them, so it is important that they maximize their movement on a fight like that. This is something that it's a risk that they did take when they, of course, locked into the major for the series. They did win the first map, so they do have map advantage going into the third one. Lura here is on 87%. Backlash is going on. They have cleared the second set of trash. Of course, they will end this phase, maybe around 70-60%. They're not doing a lot of single target burst here, but it's just a simple war of attrition versus Lura, and then they should be able to clinch this one out.
You're seeing 75% here as they are leaving the backlash. Their burst isn't too big as we're going on to the full screen here, focusing all eyes on SKYLINE top here. One important thing to note is we are on this kind of stage here. It is very important to note that we are going to be having, of course, quite a bit of ticking and increasing ticking damage throughout the portion of this fight, which can be quite deadly, especially in a tyrannical setting when there's just so much boss health to deal with. There will be the cast at Ludra there, picking up all of the void zones there, picking all of them up and pushing them to the current location of everybody else there. And it's very important to kind of watch out for those mechanics. It's not quite the volcanic that we're always going to be used to, but it's very important to move out of those. Watch for the shift there, the grand shift that's going on, dodging them and keeping everybody tightly packed in together. It's nice nice to be able to have the Warlock there off to the side because he's going to be healing himself most of the time. But otherwise, for the Paladin especially, you want to make sure everyone's pretty close in for those Light of Dawns.
Yeah, as long as you guys are well coordinated on a boss like this, the circles that are going to be spawned during the transition are actually not, of course you don't want to stand in them, but as soon as they spawn, you can run into the previous puddles a little bit safely. You will take a little bit of damage, but not nearly as much damage as if you had just planted and then got all those things sandwiched on top of you. Boss is at 50%. They're looking pretty good. You know, the Paladin's mana is a little bit low, but it's nothing to be afraid of. Everyone's looking quite healthy. Of course, this fight will continue to ramp up as the boss gets lower and lower, but they do have execute classes, so once this boss hits that 20% mark, it should start dying significantly faster.
Yeah, but you're seeing there the Paladin sparing no expense to just keep everybody at a balanced level of HP. His Holy Avenger is just about to be falling off here. Probably will be looking to see, for example, the Aura Mastery coming out as well to deal with this very, very creepy wind chime coming out. And that's what you're talking about. You know, once they start entering into that execute phase, it's very easy to be able to get it down very quickly. But one thing to always watch out for the healer is getting that vampiric aura going out, especially when you're going to be at, you know, the high damage points for your party members. You know, knowing when you're able to kind of take it easy and when you want to ramp up. So you were seeing, you know, there was that in-between period when Holy Avenger was down and Wings was not up, where everyone was just staying pretty well topped, and there was a very large expensive mana there. But you also have to look at, you know, how well they were really relying on the extra leech healing to kind of carry them through that. So now Wings are up. They're, even though the Paladin is at about 5 or 10% in terms of mana, they still, I believe, have access to Aura Mastery. There goes Aura Mastery right now just to kind of balance out their health pools. That should be able to be enough to kind of carry them through the point where they can get into Execute. Now that they're into Execute, you'll be relying a lot more on the leech healing that the Death Knight can provide to the rest of the group. And again, the Paladin is playing very conservatively. And I would like to see, you know, they're getting their Tears Deliverance off, which is an excellent free heal. I would maybe want to see, if they haven't used Bubble yet, maybe just using Bubble and just kind of avoiding healing himself. As you are seeing that debuff, that little dot coming out on blue right there, can deal quite a bit of damage. And it was nice. It was fantastic when they were able to get it on the Warlock, about 2 or 3 times in a row, because he's just able to heal himself mostly. When you're seeing it, there's the Bubble going after the Paladin. When you're just not even having to worry about it, you're seeing Holy Avenger coming up again. Extremely, extremely good endurance, extremely good stamina on the part of blue there. Getting very, very clean run and Seed of the Triumvirate, and SKYLINE top taking game 2.
Yep, justified full screen, I think, at the end there. Very one-sided affair. Very good run, honestly, coming out of SKYLINE top. And, I mean, it bodes confidence for this team, the fact that they're willing to practice this map so hard, since it will be the first one in the grand final, Sawas.
Yeah, so there's, you know, there's a lot of mental game that goes into picking a dungeon like Seed of the Triumvirate, you know. It can be very frustrating to play in there. You know, we saw a couple players stay dead for a long period of time. Hopefully they're all doing okay. They have some time now to, you know, to gather their thoughts, move into this next dungeon, and then they just have to, you know, play, of course, much better than they did previously in a dungeon that they're more practiced in, and they could take this game 3.
Yeah, and I mean, that was an all SKYLINE affair, of course. I mean, the all SKYLINE affair is still alive, right? Like, the hope and the dream for both these teams, that's what they want to do. And actually, it was interesting, that time of 32 minutes would have actually been enough for them to beat SKYLINE D last time, which is something we talked about a little bit, because, of course, they did have that wipe at the very end of that one in a very close instance. But now we will be looking at game 3, of course, being the choice for CBA. That might have been a bit of a throw map. They didn't really look too confident. I mean, they've still got a good chance since they do have that advantage, Jack.
That's right, they do have that advantage. This advantage we've really been seeing quite a lot throughout this tournament, where they are able to have, you know, they won the first map, and now they're going to be able to pick that third map again. It's going to be having to be something that's going to be their comfort pick. I mean, in the past, though, I do wonder if nerves might be getting to them just a little bit, because this is going to be potentially repeating history if CBA does drop this map, losing again in a reverse sweep there.
Yeah, you know, being reverse sweep tight twice would be really unfortunate for these guys. It is their map choice, so they will be more comfortable there. You know, all they have to do is, you know, they got like 20 minutes left, maybe a little bit more. Just gather your thoughts, you know, be strong, do the dungeon cleanly, and then they could proceed on to the next series.
Yep, we are looking at attempt 2 here. They're trying to get the reverse sweep once again. Of course, CBA were 1-up in the first time these two teams met, but it was SKYLINE top that came out. In attempt 2, SKYLINE top do kill Larura and reclaim their seat to tie up the series. Now, just one key away, but CBA, it's in their court. The next game will decide our top 3. The next game will finalize who faces SunSky for that final spot at the global finals. This is the Mythic Dungeon Invitational China region. Join us after this. Hello, ladies and gents. You join us once again for the Mythic Dungeon Invitational, and I'm joined by Sweets and Sours. We've got Jack here. He's been a smiley guy. He's been touching my hand a little bit, which has been a little bit disturbing during the break. But we are at an interesting point in the series. It's tied 1-1. Elimination, of course. CBA versus SKYLINE Top. Both these guys have a lot on the line here. They want to qualify to those global finals, and they want to have the opportunity to play against SunSky once again in this competition. Now, CBA, of course, they won the first map, but they got countered in the second one. SKYLINE Top have already reverse sweep themselves. Do you think they can do it again?
I think they definitely have it under their belt. It could be very possible. You know, we'll have to see what map the CBA decides to take them to. You know, there's a couple of maps that are favorable for them. They do have the Mage, so that Blackrock hold is very possible. You know, it's anyone's game at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, we were saying during the break that we've actually seen every single map in both of the pools, so it's really interesting to see that these guys do have different maps that they prefer. It sounds like we do have the map choice ready for this team right now, so we can see it looks like we are going to be diving into the Archway here. Some more purple, some more long and enduring instances, Jack.
Oh, I love the purple here. Yeah, but it's definitely another endurance test, but I believe that what we've already seen has been SKYLINE Top already winning decisively. I mean, it was the game that Sours and I had casted together, you know, very decisively winning on Archway.
Yeah, I don't think we've actually seen CBA on that map, right?
No, we haven't. So this must be a very confident pick out of CBA. They have seen SKYLINE Top in this dungeon earlier, so that them picking this dungeon means that they think, oh, we saw your time there, we can beat it, we have what it takes, and so, you know, it's making a very bold statement to take SKYLINE Top back to the Archway.
Yeah, and I'm hearing in my ear that it is going to be Grievous as the third affix. We are ready to dive into this one now. So, of course, this is the final game. This is game 3. Neither of these teams can afford to lose this map. They have to beat the Archway. They have to be the fastest team. It's a race at the end of the day. It's a race to the finish, and the top teams in China will not allow mistakes. CBA versus SKYLINE Top. Jack and Sours, take it away.
I'm seeing SKYLINE Top here on the right side. What we had seen last time out of them was hopefully very similar to what we're about to see here, where we're seeing, you know, again, that death run that they're going to be pulling out here, everyone activating again their Sky Step potions. Because last time that we were in this dungeon, we had to be dealing with explosive. Now we're dealing with Grievous. What do you think about CBA again taking the route here where they're getting the Shroud of Concealment versus the death run?
So, you know, there's a lot of differences going on right here in the first few seconds of this dungeon. So, of course, CBA has sent the Rogue forward to have that green slime jump on him so that he does not jump a second time before going back and gathering his team for the Shroud of Concealment past all of those mobs. You know, CBA, of course, does not have the Warlock that SKYLINE Top has, so they will not be able to, you know, tame one of those mobs to gain that haste buff for the entirety of the dungeon. Of course, once again, you know, SKYLINE Top has done this suicide run, and they've luckily not placed a pylon in a puddle this time, so they are up much quicker. You know, it looks like just the Demon Hunter was safe. Everybody else is kind of, you know, hanging out in that puddle, and very soon they'll all be releasing and gathering themselves up, and then heading on to Naltira to as their route was last time.
That's right, and you're seeing, you know, CBA very interestingly actually chose to engage with a lot of those mobs rather than going for a death run. So they're already starting off with a 17% trash timer, and it does look like both of them are going into these Mana Wraith rooms and taking them on, and just like SKYLINE Top probably will be as well here. And again, huge pulls coming out, and you're seeing, you know, mirror pulls on both sides. But it'll be very interesting to see because a lot of the trash that CBA is just taking care of is going to be some of the trash that's consumed a lot of time for SKYLINE Top, and I believe they actually wiped on when they were going to the last boss here.
Yeah, you know, you want to make sure that you're not wiping to any of this trash. You know, of course, we did see some very costly runbacks coming out of the previous teams in this dungeon. You know, less in this dungeon can set you back an incredible amount of time. You know, that first pull is the most dangerous, which is why both teams have opted to skip it. SKYLINE Top with the death run and CBA with the Shroud of Concealment. They're clearing up this trash pack around the same time. Of course, SKYLINE Top does have that 17% additional trash that they cleared in that first circle, which SKYLINE Top will have to come and clear later in the dungeon. They're moving into the spider room together. They've got lots of spiders to kill. You know, that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to see, you know, both teams taking the very same route and looking as if they are neck and neck, but CBA, of course, being a bit more efficient, getting that trash down very, very early. It will be interesting to see, though, when we're looking, we always laud how great of an advantage that it's going to be having that the Warlock there to be able to take on the Chaos Bringer, which is huge damage. But will be interesting to see because there is, right off the bat here, CBA does have quite an advantage.
An interesting thing to note here with SKYLINE top is that they have opted not to go and tame that Warlock pet before engaging these spiders. You, of course, can go run over there early and grab that Warlock pet to buff your guys, but they have opted that they do not need it, and they kill these spiders very fast, as you see, as they move towards grabbing these trash and getting that buff for the boss.
And one of the scariest things having to do with this instance, it's definitely going to be the raging it that you're going to be seeing here, and especially comes to fruition where you're seeing the Blade Lords coming out here. The Blade Lords love to just jump behind a player and hit him with a huge dot. Whenever they enrage, the dot also is affected by that enrage. So one of the biggest things with your healers, is dealing with one dot, when you're, especially when it's not going to be on a Warlock, when they're not able to heal themselves or huge amounts, it can be just such a hassle to deal with. And you're seeing, the dot going out, just one dot, not too bad to deal with when it's on the Warlock, but when you're getting two, it's just absolutely shredding through blue, and he has to fight through that dot, and he has to fight through the Grievous.
So definitely a lot of damage going out. You see the mage dropping incredibly low. Looks like he's popped Ice Block to stay alive. That's what happens in these dungeons. There's a lot of damage going out from all these mobs. This is, of course, a 23, and, we will be seeing only 24s after this series is over, so the dungeons only get harder from here. They were going into this boss, of course, in previous dungeons, CBA has actually had a more impressive single target damage on this boss, but here in Arcway, with this Warlock pet, the damage difference could be more than made up for SKYLINE top.
Well, they're going to need the damage to be more than enough for them because they're already at 52% on the side of CBA here. They're going to need that extra damage. They're going to need, YD's strength to be able to keep them topped off here. And again, you're seeing, the markers being put out on people's heads, and I love being able to see this, being able to have, clearly defined areas of where everybody is going to be going. You're seeing the yellow marker there on the right side of your screen marking where the Warlock 4-team SKYLINE top is always going to be porting with his demonic circle regardless of where he's standing right now. It makes it a lot easier for your other two melee to have a good idea of where they're going to run to, and I love being able to have a strat just to have the general knowledge, just everybody know where they're going to be coordinating to, because if the Warlock, for example, does not necessarily have his gateway, does not necessarily have his portal, you are able to rely on the jump, you are able to rely on the Fell Rush of your other mobile DPS to be able to take care of it.
Now, this is the kind of coordination you expect to see from teams who have made it this far in the tournament. This is a boss where you do not want to hold hands with your friend, which we will want to see over on Corsolax. If you hold hands with a friend and run out together, then you'll find that one of you is going to meet an untimely end. I'm holding hands with Jack right now. We're all friends here on the desk. They're killing Naltarax together. The YD's dropping low. You do have to be careful of these puddles that Naltarax spawns. They will do a very large haste debuff on you. You want to make sure that you don't stand in those, because they will kill you, they will lower your damage, and they're also going to slow your movement down considerably.
Yeah, but it's really nice to see CBA making use of the Blessing of Freedom there to drop it onto the mage. That way he's more quickly able to get out of it and also just not be affected by the debuff there. Important to note with the Blink Strikes is that more often than not, it will always just be targeting a ranged player on the first one, and it definitely will always be targeting a melee on the second Blink. So it's very, very important, especially as a healer, to be able to have that extra defensive or just a very, very rapid reaction to be able to top off that damage. You are seeing, again, the Demon Hunter going down for SKYLINE top. They were not quite able to break their Tangled Web rapidly enough, but they are quite a bit ahead here on boss damage.
Yeah, so, this is the power of that Warlock pet. You see CBA is doing a lot of damage, but SKYLINE top is staying just that much further ahead, and we will likely see them moving in to do that big Paladin Invis run, and then into pyloning. Of course, CBA does have a rogue to accompany the Paladin, so he will be able to make it a lot of the way with that Invis potion, and then he'll follow it up with a Shroud of Concealment to get him the extra distance. Perhaps even everybody might use an Invis potion and then Shroud of Concealment. We'll have to see what they decide to do as they head towards the next boss.
Yeah, but you're seeing, it's nice to be able to have that extra Shroud of Concealment, as well as also having the sap to be able to just deal with that Chaos Bringer. First, they have to be dealing with this Dreadborn Seer. You do have to be watching out for, again, the eyes, which the eyes and, of course, the prophecies. The prophecies, usually you're able to just grip from the side of the DK, either with Gorfine's Grasp or with a regular Death Grip. They do let it go through, and it does deal tons and tons of damage. Thankfully, again, it's only a 23 Tyrannical, not a Fortified. Otherwise, you would have been having a much, much different story of many people going down rapidly.
Yeah, so we can see SKYLINE top just kind of hanging out right now. Where is their Paladin gone? Well, he's gone on a journey around the world. These guys are going to be dealing with this mob here and then quickly going and killing themselves as the Paladin sets up himself to do the skip. CBA is doing something similar. They're heading on out. We'll have to see how they decide to approach it. We have seen, of course, SKYLINE top doing a very similar execution in this dungeon earlier. This is the second time they've been here today. They are warmed up. They're looking quite strong.
And we're seeing Skyline top again, perfect execution of, on the behalf of blue there, getting into that safe corner there. It's nice. You have a symmetrical room here. You have that corner that they're standing here right now for blue, and you also have another identical corner on the opposite side. That corner, though, the opposite corner is much more vulnerable because the tunnel with which you use to enter in, as you're seeing on your left side of your screen, as you're seeing CBA going through right now, there is that patrol that actually walks a fair bit of distance into the room there, which makes it much, much more difficult to be able to easily get in there and to easily avoid a lot of those mobs. You're seeing CBA's Rogue sapping the middle part of the patrol, making it so that they're not going to be running around, not going to be moving around, not being able to have any kind of extra harm. But I am looking to see when the Holy Paladin, there he is. The Holy Paladin then rezzing up from his pylon, dropping a feast, getting a little snack, taking it easy before he does res the rest of his team.
So Skyline top doing this just a little bit faster. They are, of course, 6 deaths up on CBA, so they have significantly more penalty from that timer on them. So while they are pulling this boss ahead, technically they might still be a little bit behind because of those additional deaths. There is a lot to watch out for as a call. People are going down. YD is dying. They've decided to do this boss with the trash. This is absolutely, this is, really unfortunate. They do have a pylon there, so they will be able to recover. If they did not have that pylon, that wipe there would have set them back a tremendous amount. The Paladin would no longer have had that Invis Potion available to do the skip. There is, of course, a 10-minute cooldown on Invis Potion, and something, of course, to be... there is also a death now from CBA. Night Elf is done, but, of course, they have not pulled the boss, so they don't have to be as worried about it. They can simply finish up this trash and then res him up. We do have to wait for Skyline top to res. Of course, if you die a lot, pylon will take longer to revive you.
You're seeing them just taking the extra time waiting for that pylon because blue on the side of Skyline top had already just used a pylon. It's a very aggressive move that they had actually put in there, and I do believe that they also are sated, so they're not going to be able to do the same exact pull. They actually didn't get any of the trash killed at the same time as they engaged with the boss. Losing YD there, losing a huge portion of their damage that they've really been leaning on constantly throughout this series. It just makes it so much more difficult. And I'm actually quite surprised to see them pulling into the boss again, just working on the same exact mechanic.
If at first you don't succeed, try again, even without Lust. They've got, we're missing some cooldowns before now that they should have available, unless they use some of the previous pull, in which case they are definitely not available. They need to be careful of this trash. If they wipe again here, it could be absolutely disastrous. Zakala at 85% for CBA and 90% for Skyline top. There's a lot to watch out for on this boss. There's, of course, these void zones that are coming down on the ground that you need to be aware of. There's these purple lines that will kill you if you stand on them, as well as these pillars, which he was up to. There's really no reason to stand on these pillars. Maybe they're afraid of getting knocked back into them. That's a very cheeky thing. Like what in the world are they doing?
Yeah, it's quite a risk. To be able to. Well, it's to be getting yourself in a position where you might be getting knocked back by them, but I also really wanted to give credit to blue there. It was a fantastic job healing up a lot of the dot targets that are going out. And again, like I said, with the Blade Lords, when they are putting that nasty dot out and they are getting enraged, he was healing up both the Warlock and the Warrior there, both together as they're taking a raging dot, as they're taking so much damage. There's so many void zones for them to avoid. There's the eye damage that's coming out from the seer. So it was just a tremendous job by blue, making sure that pull was clean. You're finally starting to see blue dishing out like a little bit more damage here, and after that kind of scary pull goes out there. And I would like to see, again, maybe on both sides for the Chinese region, just a little bit more damage being dealt by the healers just overall.
And so we're seeing here the story of this tournament so far with these two teams head-to-head, where CBA has had better single-target damage, but of course, Skyline top does have that Warlock pet, and so they are actually, it looks like, maybe even catching up on Zakal. They, of course, do now have a 10-death deficit over CBA, so even if they do catch up and maybe even pass on Zakal and kill at the same time, there is still a lot of time to be made up for on those deaths. They were going to have to pull quite big, and of course, they did pull 17% less kill count at the start of the dungeon, so while the boss may be close and they are just on the heels, even with all these deaths, they are quite a lot of kill count behind. And so while this may look really neck and neck, this is really in CBA's favor right now. They're looking quite strong in this dungeon that they chose to take Skyline top to, even after seeing Skyline top perform so well in the same dungeon earlier today.
And we're really seeing that extra additional risk. I mean, well, it really paid off for them in the first, or the previous series that we were doing when they were in that other arcway, where they were able to get everything down together with Lust, missing out on Lust as they're going on to Zakal. I mean, just taking such a long time to be able to kill. And again, the extra 5 deaths when they had to get the full wipe again, dropping another pylon, and having to wait even longer for the pylon cooldown to fall off for the Paladin, so he's able to res everybody else. It just starts soaking up so much time. And now, keep in mind, we're only into the second boss here, so there still is quite a bit of time, very, very large amount of room for SKYLINE top to get back on top and get past CBA here.
Yeah, we could see some very big pools available in the rest of the dungeon. We did not see either team earlier pool Corsollax with the trash in his room. If you're feeling brave and you can kick those Eyes of the Vortex that are cast by the trash in the room, which will, of course, put out a very dangerous dot on the entire team, which, you know, very easily can take the life of one, if not all 5 of your members, then you can pool that trash with the boss. They will drop some haste bubbles for you. You do have the Warlock buff. You can blow it all up at the same time, and you can make up a ton of time that way.
And they might be forced into that position to do it, but it'll be very interesting to see as both teams are finishing up, or have finished up their call. They are moving on to Corsollax's room, and you know, like I said, both times we were seeing, you know, Corsollax being delayed as they moved on to Ivanir, and usually you're seeing just Corsollax being, you know, brought back and taken care of later. So maybe we'll see a scenario if SKYLINE top does seem to be especially desperate, where they might pull, you know, Corsollax first, or they might just get only the necessary trash to move on to Ivanir and then get the next 2 packs along with Corsollax later on.
Yeah, these two teams are really standing right in the same spot, but of course they are quite far apart. They do have the death difference, they do have the kill count difference. We do not see this boss being pulled, so it is very likely that looks like SKYLINE top is doing a slightly different setup to this pool, where they are doing some of the trash outside of the room as opposed to all the trash inside of the room. Perhaps they are intending to come back later to deal with this trash. Of course, CBA is doing quite a good job killing all this trash. Very cleanly done. No deaths from them. You know, all that trash is dead. Looks like they are going straight into the boss. Of course, what we talked about earlier is that if you do choose to kill Corsollax first and then Ivanir last, and you end up wiping or something on a later boss, the run back from Ivanir's room is considerably longer than from Corsollax's room. So this is a very interesting choice coming out of these guys.
Very interesting, and you're seeing just very, very little healing coming out from the Paladin there. It was actually quite terrifying. As he is pumping out that extra damage, he really was ignoring a lot of the pulsing damage coming out there, and now he has to deal with quite a bit of Grievous stacks in addition to the quarantine. So it was very fortunate, for example, that it didn't go out onto the Rogue, who was getting up to that 5 stacks of Grievous there. He's trying to clear out the stacks on himself and the Mage, finally doing so. It's one of the biggest things, you know, as you're looking at having to deal with these affixes. We haven't talked too much about Grievous in this series, but just really the focus that you're seeing out of both Paladins, you know, being able to take very good advantage of Beacon of Virtue to be able to top off the entire group and have those chunky, large heals going out, replicating, of course, your single target healing onto everybody, or replicating all of your healing onto everybody else, making it so much easier to just be able to get everybody topped off and rapidly focusing and clearing these Grievuses.
And we see the Paladin is actually going and gathering some of these haste bubbles for himself out of CBA. Maybe he'll actually do more damage or heal a lot quicker with that haste. You know, I have heard that haste for Paladins is only good if you like to run out of mana faster. It is a very interesting choice for him to pick up these bubbles. You know, CBA or SKYLINE top has, of course, changed the route up from last time, where they went to Ivanir first and then Corsollax second. Here they have decided to engage Ivanir as their 3rd boss, as opposed to as their 4th boss. They are a little bit behind. They, of course, do have that Warlock pet buff, so they will be able to make up some of the damage they are behind, but, you know, this 43% versus 89%, they are, you know, see a nice buddy job there, keeping the Paladin standing next to his Warlock so that he can easily break him out of that imprison.
You're seeing just having that the simple, you know, kind of series and the kind of cycle that you're going to be going through. You are going to be having, for example, the vacuum coming out there from the gathering power as Corsollax does clear out all of the haste buff patches. You will then start seeing again the orb coming out that just deals quite a bit of damage. Then you're going to be having some of the suppression coming out, dealing lots of damage to the entire group, and then you're going to be getting back into that quarantine. So you have these opportunities to be able to kind of run around the room, pick up whatever buffs that you can, get back to a buddy, get ready for quarantine, pick up whatever buffs you can, then you're having to deal with the vacuum, and then start rinsing and repeating here.
Yeah, we did see in the previous Arcway series today 2 different approaches to pulling the trash before Ivanir. SKYLINE top opted to pull it in 2 trash pools, and they were successful doing it that way, but of course there was, I believe, explosive in the earlier dungeon, and the other team attempted to pull the entirety of the room, and they did wipe to the explosive. Of course, that explosive is not present here in Arcway, so pulling the entire trash before Ivanir is very likely to happen, and, you know, of course, when you can pull more trash, you go that much faster.
Yeah, but you're seeing CBA taking down, wiping the floor, there we go, with Corsollax there as they're engaging with these warp shades, making sure that they're pulling them back in, making sure it's going to be a little bit easier to deal with these phase breaches, but they're also making sure they're getting the line of sight on, so that way they're able to pull those mobs in with a bunch of the extra mana race coming out here. Again, stacking up as much of the trash as possible. It's very, very important for them to get those kicks out on the phase breaches, because they did have basically both those warp shades in the open field. You are losing your Demon Hunter in the process there, but the res is very, very close by, so you should be able to get back into the action very rapidly. I like this pull, and it's something we haven't quite seen that much. You know, looking at some of the trash, it's going to be a lot less lethal, a lot, you know, easier to kind of deal with. Once they're able to get that Demon Hunter back, things are going to be looking a lot more stable, getting everybody into that Chaos Nova and being able to get just huge, huge damage out here.
Yeah, it's certainly not a pull I've ever seen done here by CBA. The Demon Hunter has died twice in this pool. People are getting quite low. You know, they're cleaning up this trash. Demon Hunter is just around the corner. There's a lot of things to kick in this pool. Luckily, there we do see a couple of Blood Elf silences going off, making sure to, of course, keep those cast downs. Now, Blood Elf Silence is a fantastic utility spell in these dungeons. A 1 minute 30-second cooldown currently that will do a silence to everything around you. A blanket silence, you know, for 3 seconds, which will allow you to kick as many spells as possible. And if you have Sefu's Secret, you can proc it even when a mob is not casting, because it does apply a blanket silence. So it's really great utility from these guys. Really well done on that pull, despite the deaths.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to be seeing a lot more out of these paladins is a lot of times I'm not really seeing either the Holy Pally dropping Consecration too frequently there, especially when they're getting into that very large pool. You were seeing CBA's Holy Pally kind of running past all the mobs, almost running through them like he's going to drop Consecration, then just kind of skipping past them. And that's one of the things, you know, the lowest maintenance possible. You know, I know that you want to be able to play safe as a healer, you want to be able to be secure, and you want to be able to make sure everyone stays alive. But one of the biggest things is going to be helping both these teams, you know, whoever is hoping to go further into this tournament, you know, really relying on that extra healer damage, leaning on it to be able to do only the necessary healing, only clearing out, for example, the Grievous stacks, you know, when they actually need to, when they have, you know, the extra healing necessary to be able to get to top. So that's one thing I'd like to see a little bit more of. You know, we have been seeing for both these groups, you know, lower damage overall, and I think SKYLINE Top's healer in blue has been doing a much better job.
Yeah, we are hoping to see, of course, a lot more damage coming out of these healers. Perhaps we'll see more in the upcoming regions. They did a nice job cleaning up that trash for CBA. We did see some of those sparks from that mob doing quite a lot of chunking damage to both the Rogue and the Demon Hunter. You do have to be careful of those as a melee. It appears the DK has gone in and pulled both sides of the worms. He has engaged the Forgotten Spirit. By line of sighting around this corner, the Forgotten Spirit will come around and continue to cast Torment, and now these worms are coming to join the party, and they're simply going to stack them up. The Demon Hunter will be able to I-beam everything down. Fire Mage is doing a lot of AoE. All of these worms help single target for the Rogue. Really, really nice pull.
Really scared to see, actually, if they're going to be able to have another interrupt or two, because they do have the Forgotten Spirit, who is enraged, and that's where you see the darkness coming down there. There were a couple pretty early interrupts. I believe it was by the Demon Hunter. That way he's able to get enough resources. So I'm glad they were able to actually get the Forgotten Spirit down very quickly, because if you're in a fortified situation, as you're seeing right now for SKYLINE Top, the entire group getting hit by one of those raging torments, it's usually very good to be able to let a couple of the first casts go through. That way it's going to be a lot easier to heal, and that way you're always going to have all of the interrupts that you need as you're getting into the raging part and the enraged Forgotten Spirit.
Of course, we see CBA now doing a very similar pull to SKYLINE Top did in this dungeon, where you pull both left and right there, and by line of sighting back across this bridge, these mobs will run all the way across and stack quite nicely for you. Of course, the Gorfiend's Grasp is used to keep these mobs stacked up, and all those small worms die very quickly. Of course, we no longer have that Sanguine Affix we had in the earlier dungeons. If that had been present, that's a lot of puddles that would have been there. Could have possibly healed these Warp Shades up to full. They do like to heal themselves up to full normally themselves, so you need to make sure that you kick the Phase Breach, you kick this Arcane Reconstruction, which you're doing a great job at, and you know, this looks really clean from CBA. This is their dungeon pick, and you know, they picked it with confidence, and we can see why.
I mean, you're seeing them, they're at 94% already on trash. You know, a huge amount of the trash percent that's already been cleared out, of course, has been trash that, you know, SKYLINE Top will have to engage with later on in order to actually activate the final boss here. So great to see the Arcane Anomalies just being taken down here. You do have to be watching out for these sparks that are coming out in melee. Those Astral Sparks, especially when you're running these double melee comps, are just so dangerous. So I love the presence of mind coming out of the Blood DK, very rapidly moving all of them out, letting, of course, the Paladin and the Fire Mage again taking them down and opening up basically the melee back again, opening it up for business.
Yeah, so we see, you know, I think something that's kind of cool about this dungeon is they did choose the Fire Mage and they did come to Arcway, and we talk about how great the Warlock is in the Arcway, how much nicer maybe a Blackrock hold would have been for the Mage, but you know, this shows you that you don't always need to do weird, funny cheeses. As long as you play cleanly, you have less deaths, you play smart, and you pull carefully. You don't need to do these weird, emceeing a mob or spell stealing. It's the better team who plays more cleanly, with more confidence, and with more practice that pulls ahead in these dungeons.
And it's a consistency factor that we've been constantly seeing out of CBA as we're going throughout this map. I mean, SKYLINE top in the previous series just did phenomenally well going through this instance when they were able to make sure that, every single trash pull that they were doing, was well thought out. They were being methodical. They were taking their time when they needed to wait for more CDs. And we really didn't quite see that. And what has really sunk them has been that Zakal pull, having to burn, very dangerous boss like Zakal on Tyrannical from full to zero without Bloodlust, and just having their entire Bloodlust going down the drain. And that's one of the things that they still need to be able to catch up on, and they're really going to be leaning on that extra boss damage that they do have in very, very strong amount. As you're seeing, SKYLINE top here was later on pulling Ivanir than CBA was, but they already are rapidly catching up in terms of boss health.
Yeah, so they're just a tad behind. Of course, it looks so close. See, these bosses are at the same health, but you look at all the other things on the screen telling you about the progress of this match. 17 deaths to 8. 96% kill count to 73% kill count. The SKYLINE top has a lot to catch up on. The wipe is still very possible. Maybe not realistic, but this is still anyone's game. This is very close. On 50%, hopefully they're getting nice kicks on Ivanir. They've done a great job with the triangles here. We see these beautiful lines being created on the side, well away from anybody. Nobody has to risk them. There is a death out of SKYLINE top. The Demon Hunter again. He is back up. He is immediately in Grievous. You have to make sure to top him up after that battle res goes out. This isn't the SKYLINE top we saw in Arcway earlier. Maybe a bit of that exhaustion is coming in. These long series, players spend an absolute tremendous amount of time, both in time trials and in these days. You have to make sure that you take care of yourself, get up and walk around every now and then. Just make sure you stay hydrated. Really, it's a mental game as well as it is a physical game here. And so they're doing a great job, and they're just a little bit behind. But they were ahead on the boss. Now they're behind on the boss. That's that's the danger of the death. 18 to 8 deaths, 73% kill count to 96% kill count. It's a very close dungeon still.
Yeah, but you're seeing SKYLINE top having that close death there, and they're also just trying to make sure they're getting all their volatile energies out as best as they possibly can. There can be very, very huge damage coming out, and they really are reducing their field to be able to move around with. And one scary thing is the more that you're moving around when you're having to deal with these little triangles, the more that you're pushing and jostling your other teammates around. So it can make it a lot harder, for example, to be able to have those perfect lines. You're seeing a much cleaner job here by the CBA, and both SKYLINE top has just basically eliminated about half of the real estate that they have to work with in this room.
Yeah, so we might see some sort of really crazy pull out SKYLINE top. They have a lot of kill count to make up after this boss. These should file right around the same time. Of course, any wipe further in the dungeon means that by choosing Ivanir last, they have an incredibly long run back. Just 4% kill count remaining for CBA. They do have additional 2% kill count to do before they spawn the last boss. SKYLINE top, of course, has 25% kill count they need to make up. They are both heading back to that final room to engage this last boss, and this series is still very close. We'll have to see what ends up happening.
I mean, you're seeing CBA there taking care of the last of those warp shades, relying on that little bit of trash to be able to take down or to spawn the boss there. You are seeing SKYLINE top, and it kind of brings us back to what we were talking about when we were looking at the danger that you're going to be seeing, for example, in getting enough trash and playing risky enough to get the trash packs that they really need to be able to get back to the boss. And it's very interesting. You're seeing the mage actually pulled them away, or sorry. I believe the mage actually pulled them away, then invised, but it looks like he actually did accidentally pull them again, so he is going to go off and die and try to reset that warp shade, and he will need to be able to kind of skip around, so maybe he'll just kind of take the long way around. Team CBA choosing instead to take on these mana wraiths rather than the warp shades, not really having to worry about the extra, extra interrupts, the extra focus fire that they really need to be doing to them. Actually, interesting to see they did use a battle res to be able to get their mage up. That way he doesn't have to actually just kind of spawn around the long way and just kind of hinder the team.
Yeah, very interesting strategy there by CBA. I've never quite seen something like it. Can you sap those mobs? Can you imprison those mobs? They have the rogue, they have the demon hunter. Maybe you can blind them. I'm not quite sure. Maybe Shroud isn't up on cooldown yet, but they now have kill count. The doors should be open. They can head on to the boss room and engage the last boss. SKYLINE top does have a lot of kill count they need to catch up on. They are doing quite a large trash pull right now, making sure to kite it out of these puddles. A lot of damage going out. They're doing a great job.
And we're seeing CBA here taking advantage of that Shroud to make sure that they're able to get back down into the boss room there. having a nice, little bit of a shortcut that we're able to see out of there. And it's not something that we're commonly being able to see. So it's nice to be able to kind of have that, roundabout approach to it. And they are getting a pretty good position on this Forgotten Spirit as they're able to kind of dodge around him and then be able to just go the opposite way around the ring that is Advisor Vondros' room. So very, very cool here. Right as we're seeing SKYLINE top, just posturing themselves, getting ready for just a giant pull that they really need to have. They really need to execute well in order to survive this series.
Yeah, so these crystals, of course, on Vandros are incredibly dangerous. You need to make sure that you're cutting the boss in a nice circle and, always being aware of your surroundings. And, of course, once the 50% transition happens, he will choose one target, which he will then chase around, and you have to drop a bunch of void zones on the ground, which, if you stand in, will kill you. These orbs are exploding. They can push you into these crystals. There's a lot that can go wrong in this boss. All they have to do now, the dungeon is in their hands. Just play smart, play safe. Don't do anything silly. Don't try to get fancy. This is a really, really excellent dungeon by CBA. We can see why they've chosen this for SKYLINE top. Hopefully they shouldn't get reverse sweeped here. This looks really good for them. SKYLINE top has, they did a big trash pool, and they still have a couple more percent before they spawn the boss. They just have to take care of that, and then they'll be ready on fighting the same encounter.
I was always curious. We're seeing, CBA having quite a big advantage here going up against SKYLINE top. It was very interesting to see. We haven't even seen an Arcway out of CBA yet, so I'm always kind of curious when we're looking at the team communication or what they might be thinking going into this, saying they're watching SKYLINE top, or for example, fighting their way out of the losers bracket and watching their game in Arcway and saying, we can beat this. We have the tools. We actually have a much better strategy. And just right off the bat, they started off by taking that advantage and just snowballing on top of it, saying, oh, they're going to do a death run? They're going to wait all this time for these void zones and things like that? No, we're going to do it better. We'll do you one better. We're going to get, the Shroud of Concealment into this trash packs that we need to be getting anyway. And it just shows that there's considerable advantage already reaching the transition period at 50% as SKYLINE top is about to engage the Advisor.
Yeah, it's definitely a battle of the brains here. CBA, of course, having the better strategy. They have shown that they have the better route. They are at 50%. You have to be careful. You can still die during this run back, and a death could be very costly. They do have one battle res charge remaining, so they can, of course, get one person out of jail free if they were to fall. Everything in this run back is incredibly dangerous, but they're doing an excellent job. Everyone's staying healthy. Paladin has a ton of mana, looking really good. I've got a couple of unfortunate paths here. They do have to engage these two mobs. As long as the melee are careful, you see the Demon Hunter is standing at the bottom of the staircase. He absolutely does not want to get involved with this Wraith, as doing so could very well end his life.
Yeah, but you're seeing the additional stress that you're going to put on your healer here. As you're in any kind of pug groups or anything like that you would see online for Arcway, everyone loves being able to run into this Timeless Wraith. But this is, the healer dream you're really seeing. When there is that control put out by your group, you're able to have just your rogue running in there when he has, the extra damage reduction that all rogues do have. Being able to actually just take advantage of that and just really making sure that your Demon Hunter just kind of standing back, holding onto his resources, and just not taking that extra damage and not having, again, that extra risk. They're about to get their second battle res charge back, but they really don't want to even have to bother using it.
Yeah, of course, any death is, is one death more than you want in any situation, and 18 deaths, of course, is 18 deaths more than you want. Maybe a little bit less than that, maybe 13 more deaths, because they do have that one big mass res. Maybe even 8 of these deaths, of course, are unfortunate. They did do the 2 death skips, but they are just a little bit behind, 32% on the boss. They have not even hit that 50% transition from SKYLINE top. This is looking really clean by CBA. Excellent job from this series. SKYLINE top has had an incredible showing this entire tournament. There is still always, that magical chance that somehow something could happen and this could be their game, but this is looking quite good out of CBA.
You're just seeing it there as the unstable manas are being run out of the group. Their Demon Hunter almost going down for Team CBA, but he does a good job making sure he's not hindering, for example, the other melee. A lot of times you'll see groups get kind of fancy if they have only one melee and just running the unstable mana around the tank, and they both kind of just turning it's in opposite directions. That way they're able to run all the unstable mana around the tank, and the tank is able to just be able to avoid all of it and just pivot the boss as well to allow them. But just having their Demon Hunter running out of there, making sure that they're not hindering the rogue, and they are just constantly moving around, and I love being able to see this. They're constantly just moving out of the way of these little ticking time bombs, making sure that they're playing safe and secure. 8% left here on Advisor Vondros on the side of Team CBA. Just fantastic performance that we've been seeing here, right as SKYLINE top is, of course, entering into the transition phase.
Yeah, this is, an extreme uphill battle for SKYLINE top. Really well done dungeon by CBA. They've shown great preparation. Kudos to them. Thanks for playing SKYLINE top. You've done an excellent job, but this looks like it will be their end.
Yep, great story. CBA are able to take down SunSky Top, who of course were the team that knocked them into the lower bracket. What a run for them as well. They came from the first series of the lower bracket, of course. They lost in round 1, and they've made it all the way through to China's top 3. Of course, kudos to SunSky 3. They did have a good series, and I mean, they were a little unlucky to lose there. Actually, at the end of that one, it was a much better time than they even achieved last time they played on this map, but of course it was without explosive.
Yeah, you know, the explosive, of course, is going to slow teams down tremendously. You can't do these massive pools because those explosive orbs will, you know, they easily get out of control. 2 orbs go off, you know, that could easily kill somebody. 3 orbs go off, that's definitely going to kill somebody.
Yep, SKYLINE Top will end up losing that one. So now we can look forward into our next series. There's so many Sky teams, it always confuses me with the words, but now it will be SunSky going up against CBA, and this is the big match, right? This is the everything on the line. Loser goes home, gets, well, I mean, a little bit of prize money, so obviously that's a nice thing. There's 25k here this weekend on offer, but what you really want is qualification to that global finals. Representing China, playing out here on the big stage, meeting our big Sowers and Jack, you know, like the big guys. That's what you really want to be playing for. And I mean, we've got 3 different healers, Jack. I know you'll be quite happy to see this. We've got the Holy Paladin now, got the Discipline Priest, got the Restoration Druid. It's nice to see the representation quite even.
You're seeing quite a bit of representation, well, of course, of the priest and a little bit of the rest of shaman throughout the Chinese region, and that was one of the things we were kind of thinking about of, you know, how well represented we will be seeing of different classes, of different specializations. We've seen nothing but blood DKs, but as you know, I'm very happy to see, of course, the Disc Priest coming up, and that next series will determine, of course, like you said, if the Disc Priest will go to LAN, if we will have what might be the only Disc Priest going to LAN, or if they will fall.
Yep, well, SKYLINE Top, unfortunately, will not be making it into that live event. We do know that, but a close series. CBA take their revenge and move up. Now they will fight up against SunSky in the next series. We have 3 teams remaining, but only 2 can qualify for that global finals. Up next, CBA